I have been struggling with this situation for weeks now and finally decided to write about it. I, 29M, have always had a complicated relationship with my father James, 47M. I need to explain our family background first to help everyone understand the whole situation. I am James's oldest child from his first marriage. My biological mother left when I was 2, and I barely remember her. She struggled with drug addiction and eventually disappeared from our lives completely. I later found out she passed away when I was 8, but James never told me. I discovered this through my grandparents when I was 16. After my mom left, I mostly lived with my grandparents until I was 10. James was always working and barely around. My grandparents were amazing people who gave me stability and love during those early years. They tried to get James to give them custody, but he refused, saying a son belongs with his father. The irony is that he was hardly ever there. When I was 10, James married Rachel and they went on to have 3 sons together, Matt, 24M, Luke, 22M, and Josh, 19M. Rachel turned out to be an incredible stepmom. She never treated me differently from her biological sons and always made sure I felt included in the family. She's the type of person who remembers everyone's favorite foods, keeps track of all our important dates, and genuinely cares about our happiness. She even stood up to James multiple times when he was being too harsh with me. James has always portrayed himself as this deeply religious and moral person. He made us attend church every Sunday, led prayer before meals, and constantly lectured us about living righteous lives. He was particularly strict with me because I was the oldest and, in his words, needed to set an example for my brothers. But his version of being religious was more about appearances than actual compassion or understanding. The first major conflict between us happened when I joined the military instead of going to college like he wanted. He said I was wasting my potential and disappointing God by choosing a path of violence. The irony is that he had no problem with violence when he used to get physical during my childhood, though he always called it discipline rather than what it really was. After leaving the service, I started traveling and exploring different spiritual practices. I spent time in Buddhist temples in Thailand, lived with indigenous communities in South America, and generally tried to understand different perspectives on life and faith. James hated this. He called me a hippie, said I was straying from God's path, and even told my brothers not to listen to my stories about other cultures and beliefs. But the real breaking point in our relationship came 3 years ago when I got divorced. My ex-wife developed severe schizophrenia and became increasingly dangerous. She tried to stab me multiple times, once tried to poison my food because she thought I was a demon, and during a camping trip, she attempted to set our tent on fire while I was sleeping because voices told her to purify me with flame. When I finally decided to end the marriage for my safety, I went to James for support. His reaction was devastating. He completely shut me down, refused to even look at the police reports or hear about the incidents. He said marriage was sacred and that a real man never abandons his wife, no matter what. He quoted Bible verses about enduring hardship and insisted that with enough prayer and patience, any marriage could be saved. He cut contact with me for 6 months after that, telling my brothers I had chosen a path of sin. This brings us to the current situation. Last week, we discovered that James has been having an affair for the past 8 months. He's been seeing a woman named Sarah from his workplace and lying to Rachel about working late. We found out because Sarah's teenage son posted a photo on Instagram where James was visible in their house, having what looked like a family dinner with them. The photo caption was about family game night, and James was sitting there smiling like he belonged there. When Rachel confronted him, his response was cruel beyond belief. He told her he hasn't loved her for the past 20 years and that she's no longer attractive to him. Rachel, who has maintained herself well at 45, raised 4 boys including me, and supported James through everything, was completely blindsided. She's begging him to end the affair and go to counseling, but he's refusing. He actually had the audacity to say that Rachel should see a therapist to deal with her inability to be happy for his happiness. The hypocrisy of it all is what really gets to me. Just last month, Matt needed James's help. Matt works at James's gravel company and makes $25 per hour, but he needed verification of $30 per hour income for a home loan application. He and his wife have a 2-year-old daughter, and they've been trying to move out of their tiny apartment into a proper house. James refused to help, saying it would be lying and against God's teachings. He gave Matt this whole lecture about honesty and integrity, saying that God sees everything and judges us by our actions. Now we know he was probably sitting in Sarah's house that very evening, lying to everyone about where he was. Rachel has begged us not to confront James about knowing the affair. She's terrified he'll blame her for turning us against him, which is exactly the kind of thing he would do. My brothers are furious but trying to keep quiet for Rachel's sake. The timing is especially complicated because James and I had planned a road trip to Mexico next month. My Jeep broke down recently, and he sent me money to buy a replacement vehicle so I could drive back with my 2 dogs. He was supposed to help with the journey and navigation. I'm torn between confronting him about his hypocrisy and maintaining peace for Rachel's sake. The man who lectured me about abandoning my dangerous wife is now abandoning his faithful wife of 20 years. The man who preached about honesty is living a double life. The man who talked endlessly about family values is destroying his own family. My brothers want to cut him off completely but are worried about his reaction. He struggled with alcohol addiction years ago and has been sober for 15 years. We're all concerned he might relapse if everyone turns against him at once. I've seen him during his drinking days, and it wasn't pretty. He would get violent and say horrible things, then cry and beg for forgiveness the next day. Right now, I'm leaning towards going on the planned trip because I need the help with transportation, but confronting him afterward. However, I'm worried that spending that much time with him might make me lose my temper, especially if he starts preaching about morality again. The other woman has previously reached out to Rachel through social media, so we could always say that's how we found out if needed. Part of me wants to maintain some relationship with him for my younger brother's sake, but another part feels like he doesn't deserve any of us in his life after what he's done. I've spent years trying to understand and forgive his controlling behavior and religious hypocrisy, but this feels like the final straw. How can I ever respect someone who preaches morality while destroying his own family? Update 1: Everything has gotten far worse than I could have imagined. I decided to go ahead with the Mexico trip because I desperately needed the help with transportation and couldn't afford alternative arrangements. I thought I could keep my composure and just get through it, but that turned out to be impossible. The first day was actually decent. We drove mostly in silence, listening to the radio. James tried to make small talk about work and the weather, carefully avoiding any meaningful topics. I played along, thinking maybe we could just get through this without drama. We even managed to have a normal dinner at a small restaurant near the border. But everything fell apart on the second day. We had stopped at another restaurant for dinner when James got a call. He looked at his phone, made an excuse about it being work-related, and stepped outside. He forgot that his phone was connected to the truck's Bluetooth system from earlier, so when he answered the call in the parking lot, it came through the speakers in the truck where I was waiting. It was Sarah, his affair partner, and she was crying hysterically about how he hadn't answered her calls all day. She was saying things like how much she missed him and asking why he was ignoring her. James was trying to calm her down in this soft, loving voice I had never heard him use with Rachel. That was when I snapped. I got out of the truck and confronted him right there in the parking lot. The look on his face when he realized I could hear everything was almost comical. He quickly hung up and tried to play it off, but I wasn't having it. 20 years of pent-up anger just came pouring out. I reminded him of everything, how he treated me during my divorce, all his preaching about family values, his refusal to help Matt with the loan application. His response was exactly what I expected but somehow still shocked me. He said my situation was completely different because my ex-wife just needed prayer and patience to be cured. According to him, mental illness is just a lack of faith, and if I had been a better Christian husband, she would have gotten better. Then he had the audacity to defend his affair. He said what he has with Sarah is real love, not like his marriage to Rachel. He claimed Rachel had been emotionally distant for years and that Sarah understands him in a way Rachel never did. When I pointed out that he's known Sarah for less than a year while Rachel has stood by him for 2 decades, he just waved it off. The argument got more heated, and that's when he let slip something that made my blood boil. He admitted he's been planning to leave Rachel for months. He and Sarah have been house hunting together, and he's already picked out a place where her son can have his own room. He talked about it like it was the most natural thing in the world, completely ignoring the fact that he has 4 sons and a granddaughter who would be affected by this. I immediately called Matt and told him everything. That's when the whole truth came out. Matt revealed that James hadn't refused to help with his loan application because of religious principles, he had refused because he needed that money for the down payment on his new house with Sarah. He literally chose his affair partner over helping his own son provide a home for his young family. Matt was furious and immediately called Rachel to warn her about the money. Rachel did some digging and discovered that James had been secretly moving money from their joint account into a personal account for months. He had been preparing for this split while pretending everything was normal at home. Rachel was devastated all over again but also angry. She contacted a divorce lawyer that same day and started gathering evidence of the affair and the hidden money transfers. I couldn't stand to be around James anymore after that. I told him I was done and got a rental car to drive back home. The look on his face when I started transferring my bags to the rental car was almost pitiful. He kept switching between anger and begging. One minute he was yelling about how I was betraying him and destroying the family, the next he was pleading with me to understand his position and keep his secrets. Since I left him there, he hasn't stopped trying to contact me. His messages range from angry rants about how I've turned everyone against him to long, self-pitying texts about how no one understands true love. He even tried to guilt-trip me by saying that if I really loved him as a father, I would want him to be happy with Sarah. The most recent message I got from him was the worst. He actually tried to compare his situation to my military service, saying that just as I had to leave my family to serve my country, he has to leave his family to serve his heart. I haven't responded to any of his messages. I just can't deal with this level of delusion and self-justification. Rachel is holding up better than expected, probably because she's finally taking action instead of just hoping things will get better. She's already moved all the remaining money from their joint account into a new account in her name only. James doesn't know about the divorce preparations yet, and honestly, I'm a bit worried about how he'll react when he finds out. My brothers and I have been taking turns staying with Rachel to make sure she's okay. Luke found all the photos James had hidden of himself with Sarah and her son, dating back months before we discovered the affair. Josh discovered that James had even bought Sarah's son a gaming console for Christmas, the same Christmas he told Josh he couldn't afford to help with his college application fees. The more we discover, the more it becomes clear that James has been living a complete double life. The man who raised us to believe in honesty and integrity has been lying to everyone for months, possibly years. I don't know how we can ever trust anything he says again. Update 2: Everything has completely fallen apart now. The situation with James has gotten so much worse than any of us expected. After Rachel filed for divorce, James's entire world seemed to crumble, and his reaction has been nothing short of catastrophic. Last Tuesday, James showed up at our family home completely drunk. This was shocking enough since he'd been sober for 15 years, but his behavior was absolutely terrible. He started banging on the door at midnight, screaming about betrayal and how his family had turned against him. Rachel had to call me because she was terrified. She'd never seen him this bad, even during his drinking days before sobriety. When I got there, he was sitting on the front lawn, crying and talking to himself. The neighbors had come out to see what was happening, which made everything even more humiliating for Rachel. James kept shouting about how none of us understand true love and how we're all just jealous of his happiness with Sarah. But here's the real kicker: Sarah dumped him. Apparently, she had no idea about most of his plans. She thought their relationship was just a casual thing, something fun between two co-workers. When she found out he was planning to buy a house for them and that he'd been moving money around to leave Rachel, she was horrified. She had never asked him to leave his family and didn't want that responsibility. What made it worse was that Sarah's son had gotten attached to James and was upset about the whole situation. Sarah blocked James on everything and told her son to delete all their photos together and never post anything about James again. She even requested a transfer to a different branch of the company to avoid him. James couldn't handle the rejection. He started showing up at Sarah's workplace, sending her endless messages from different numbers, and even tried to contact her son through his gaming accounts. She had to threaten him with a restraining order to make him stop. The truly pathetic part was when he showed up at my apartment last night. He was drunk again, barely able to stand, and started crying about how he'd lost everything. But he wasn't crying about losing his wife of 20 years or his sons, he was crying about Sarah. He kept saying she was his soulmate and begging me to help him win her back. He didn't mention Rachel once during his entire breakdown. Instead, he started blaming Rachel for everything. He convinced himself that Rachel must have contacted Sarah and turned her against him. He created this whole conspiracy theory about how Rachel had orchestrated everything to punish him. When I pointed out that Sarah left him because she found out about his lies, he refused to accept it. He even accused Rachel of turning his sons against him out of spite. He said she was poisoning our minds and that we were being manipulated. That's when I lost it. I reminded him that we all saw his behavior with our own eyes. We saw the evidence of his lies, the secret bank accounts, and the way he treated everyone. The final straw was when he started talking about Matt's daughter, his only grandchild. He said that Rachel was probably telling her lies about him too, and that he had a right to see her. This was after he'd shown up drunk at Matt's house multiple times, scaring his granddaughter with his behavior. That's when I told him to leave and never contact me again. Before he left, he tried one last manipulation tactic. He brought up my biological mother, saying that she would be ashamed of how I'm treating him. This from the man who never even told me when she died. I had to learn about my own mother's death from my grandparents years later. That was the moment I knew there was no coming back from this. The next day, Luke told me that James had tried to get into Rachel's email to delete evidence she'd gathered for the divorce. He failed because Rachel had already changed all her passwords, but the attempt just showed how desperate he's becoming. He's lost all sense of right and wrong. Josh found out that James had even tried to convince some church members that Rachel had been unfaithful first, and that's why he turned to Sarah. Fortunately, nobody believed him because they'd all seen Rachel's dedication to him and the family over the years. It's becoming clear that James isn't the man any of us thought he was. He's not just having a midlife crisis or making a mistake, he's showing us who he really is. The facade of the religious, moral father has completely crumbled, revealing someone we don't recognize and don't want in our lives anymore. Update 3: It's been 3 months since everything blew up, and I felt I should give one final update. I haven't spoken to James since that night at my apartment, though not for lack of trying on his part. He's gotten increasingly desperate in his attempts to contact us, using every possible avenue he can think of. First, he had his pastor call me. The pastor tried to convince me that it was my Christian duty to forgive my father. I told him about James's behavior, the drinking, and how he tried to blame Rachel for everything. The pastor hasn't called back since. Then James started sending messages through extended family members. He told my aunt that he was dying, he wasn't, to get her to plead with us to reconcile. He told my cousin that Rachel had been abusive to him for years, she hadn't, to try to get sympathy. Nobody believes his lies anymore. Rachel's divorce is proceeding well. She found out that James had been taking money from the company too, not just their personal accounts. The company's board forced him to step down after he showed up drunk too many times. They're doing a full audit now. Rachel's lawyer says this actually works in her favor for the divorce settlement. The change in Rachel has been amazing to see. She's moved in with her sister and started taking art classes, something James always criticized as a waste of time. She's even started selling some of her paintings online. Last week, she told me she hasn't felt this free in 20 years. My brothers and I have grown much closer through all this. We have weekly family dinners at Rachel's sister's place. Matt's daughter, our little ray of sunshine, loves these dinners because she gets to play with her uncles and draw with Grandma Rachel. James isn't allowed to see her anymore after he showed up drunk at Matt's house 3 times, demanding to see her. The last time, he scared her so badly that she still asks if the angry man is coming back. Luke drove past James's new apartment last week. His truck was there, surrounded by empty bottles. He's living in this rundown complex on the edge of town, the complete opposite of the fancy house he'd planned to buy with Sarah. Speaking of Sarah, she's apparently dating someone new and has moved to a different city with her son. Some family members from church keep saying I should help James because he's still my father and he's struggling. They say he's lost everything: his wife, his sons, his job, his reputation, and his sobriety. But I remember how he treated me during my divorce, how he hid my mother's death from me, how he chose his affair partner over helping his own son, and how he tried to blame Rachel for his choices. The last attempt at contact came yesterday. James left a letter in my mailbox. I almost didn't read it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was 15 pages of him talking about himself, his pain, his losses. Not once did he apologize for what he did to Rachel or acknowledge how he hurt his family. Instead, he wrote about how we all failed him by not supporting his chance at true love. I've made peace with my decision to cut him off. The man I thought was my father, the one who preached about morality and family values, never really existed. He was just a facade, and now that the facade has crumbled, I don't recognize the person underneath. Rachel and my brothers are my real family now. We're actually happier without James's constant judgment and manipulation. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your mental peace is to walk away from toxic people, even if they're family. Maybe especially if they're family. I don't plan to make any more updates. This chapter of our lives is closed, and we're all moving forward. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice through this journey.